Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric O'Neill, and I'm the Community Engagement Associate here at CSU-Global. Thank you for joining. I am pleased to welcome you to Colorado State University Global Campus's Enlightening Talks series. Tonight's program is titled, Does the Question Come First? As we get started, I wanted to remind everyone that CSU-Global is committed to the foundational principles of academic freedom. As such, any speaker presenting material through Enlightening Talks also has freedom to express his or her own views, which do not necessarily reflect the views of CSU Global. In a moment, we will hear from Dr. Thomas Brantle. Dr. Brantle will introduce the university, CSU Global's project management, operations, and construction management programs, our Enlightening Talk series, and tonight's exciting featured speaker, Mark Woeppel. After that, Dr. Brantle will turn the call over to Mark for his presentation. When Mark concludes, we will take audience Q&A.
Thank you, Eric. Our focus is on working adults and modern learners, bachelor's completion, master's degrees, and certificate programs. There is no state funding, donors or alumni donations, and tuition-driven revenue. We also have nearly 19,000 current students. A little bit about CSU Global, some more. While the traditional college experience meets the needs of a segment of the population, the student profile is changing. It includes non-traditional students that have different needs and expectations. So research has reported that 75% of all post-secondary students are now considered non-traditional, and CSU Global has successfully built an industry-leading higher education philosophy to engage those students for the future. Now, we feel uniquely positioned in the higher education industry. CSU Global's business model is flexible. We are supportive of a modern, forward-thinking institution that allows it to utilize and build the best practices in education. Now, some statistics or numbers in how we're serving students in Colorado and beyond. We see presently we have 65% of our students are undergraduate, 40% are first generation students, 28% of the students identify themselves as racial ethnic minorities, 15% are active military, dependent, or Guard Reserve or veteran. Our students represent every U.S. state and territory and over 50 countries. The average age of students is 35 years old and married with children. So just a little bit about the project management program. Again, we offer, CSU Global, we offer Bachelor of Science and Master of Science in Project Management and Master of Project Management. Undergraduate and graduate degrees in project management, but we also offer both specializations and certificates across project management, operations management, and construction management. Our CSU Global's undergraduate and graduate degrees in project management were recently accredited by the Project Management Institute, also known as PMI, their Global Accreditation Center. For project management education programs, also known as GAC. We're very proud of that. So just a little bit about GAC for those maybe first time hearing about it. GAC accreditation or PMI accreditation ensures that the quality of the academic programs and their graduates meet the standards of the rapidly growing field of project management. So just a little bit more background on PMI, and we'll be moving on to the talk. PMI GAC, it's the world's leading specialized accrediting body for project management. It accredits programs at both the undergraduate and postgraduate and doctoral levels, offered within accredited institutions, higher education worldwide. Its primary objective, of course, is to ensure that programs in project management adequately prepare students to meet the current and anticipated needs of business and government organizations for qualified professionals working in the field of project management. The accreditation essentially has two fundamental purposes. to assure the quality and assist in the cultural improvement of an institution, of the institution and or its program. Again, benefits. It gives confirmation that our programs is committed to educational quality and continuous improvement, that we have peer recognition and achievement of quality benchmarks by PMI and GAC, and it differentiates us as one of the select group of programs that embraces and promotes the discipline of project, program, and portfolio management. So again, let me please join us in welcoming tonight's speaker, Mark Woeppel.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. And I want to talk to you about what should come first in project management. And I'll start off with a story. And that story is really about a park. And I live here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm speaking from my office in Tulsa. And in 2016, the largest gift of parkland in U.S. history was given to the city of Tulsa for this park called the Gathering Place. $350 million of private donations were given to the city, larger even than the Central Park, and it was supposed to open in the fall of 2017. However, that didn't quite work out. About 6 months in, they said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, we're going to delay the opening of that park to 2018." And why? Because of weather. And of course, you being in construction management, I think that weather is probably the lamest excuse ever for delaying a project. I mean, it's not like it doesn't rain in Oklahoma in the spring, and it's not hot in the summer. It's not like people didn't know. But I think that, the point here is that, here's a high visibility project, and the project is late. Why? Because of weather. And who wants to be that guy? Who wants to be that person that has to report to everyone, including the billionaire that funded this project, to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we made a mistake. We're now a year late." Now, this is July 2018, and the park is supposed to now open in September of 2018, maybe. So what I want to cover in this presentation is really this point here, that execution is the key to project success. And it's not about planning. It's really about making it happen, and how you as a project manager can be certain of your project as the project owner, as the project manager. How can you be certain even when things are uncertain? The issue for project managers is how to create certainty even when life is uncertain. And I think that weather is uncertainty, one uncertainty in the project. But I think that when we look at projects and what the conventional approach is, that we make a good plan and then everybody executes that plan and then everybody goes to heaven. And of course, the truth is that that's rarely the case. So let me illustrate this with an example. So you're going to take a trip, right? And you're going to go from your office in Jurong in the Pandan Gardens in Singapore, and you're going to go to the Marina Bay Sands. And this option is going to take you 22 minutes if you go by car. You could walk it, and it would take 3 hours and 20 minutes, or you could take public transportation, and it takes 47 minutes. So which route do you think is going to be the best way? You can pick. Now, if you're going to be the project, right, what do you want? Do you want the car? Do you want to walk? Or do you want to take public transport? And of course, what you want to do is you want to take the car because it's the shortest duration, because any project worth doing is worth doing quickly, yes? Well, here's your car. And this is the car of most people in projects. And I want to tell you, that I've done it the conventional way. I've done it the build a plan. And I've had lots of meetings to review the progress of that plan. And then I jump on those problems as they come up. I've done it the conventional way. I've made a detailed plan and then I jumped on the problems. But I had the opportunity to work on a project where we didn't have time to create a detailed plan. And that was in the Gulf oil spill cleanup, right? We didn't have time to do it the conventional way. And we had these objectives, right? We had to go fast. We had to clean it up fast. And so our objective in this project was really to make the visible invisible. We wanted to make sure that people in the project could see it. We had to maximize the number of resources because obviously BP was spending a lot of money during that time. And we really wanted to focus on the constraint of the bottleneck, the main bottleneck of the process, and manage and align performance because everybody on this project did not work for BP. And finally, accelerate communication. And that was the birth of this method that we call Viewpoint that I wrote about in my book. Now, what I want to share with you are those foundational principles, and there are really three of them that I have time to share with you today. One of them is managing uncertainty, collaboration, and then visibility. So we'll start with the first one, is uncertainty. And I think, you know, one of the things that we have to come to grips with in projects is that projects, by their nature, are uncertain. We don't really know everything about the project. You know, we don't know what the scope is. We don't know what the content is. We don't know how long things are going to take. And so what that means is that as making precise plans are very difficult, really impossible, because the target is always moving. And, you know, so there's a whole bunch of people out there that talk about deterministic planning. That deterministic planning simply doesn't work in terms of execution. So what happens during the project is that schedules become obsolete, right? So we make these really carefully calibrated schedules, and then things happen, you know, it rains, or, you know, the subcontractor doesn't show up, or, you know, the customer changes their mind, or whatever. You know, things change during the project, and that's the nature of the project, because a project, but in its by its own nature, is unknown. So people have to start improvising during the project, right? And that improvisation results in work that was not anticipated, things that take longer than expected, and, you know, things that change during the life of the project. And what happens is people start blaming themselves, and they start thinking, well, I'm a bad manager because, oh, you know, I didn't anticipate all of this. And I think that, you know, the point that I'm making here is that projects, they are in themselves uncertain, and we shouldn't beat ourselves up or beat our teams up just because things change, because that's the very nature of things, right? So what happens is that, you know, what we need to do in our projects is that we need to really think about the relationships and not durations and not specific scope. We need to think about, well, what are the handoffs? We need to think about the big picture and not get all tied up in the small picture, and have our project teams that are able to respond on the fly. You know, I've worked with a lot of construction projects, and, you know, the things that they say is, we've got this project plan, it's 4,000 line items long, and it's on the hard drive someplace, and no one ever looks at it. And, you know, finding what's important is really the critical thing, which is why we have so many meetings. And what we've learned is that during execution, that there are really multiple plans that have to be built and based on what level of control that we have in the project. So the CEO doesn't need to know that the engineer is going to spend 4 hours, you know, developing this project, developing this design. And the engineer doesn't need the big picture. He needs to know, what does he need to do right now? So the idea here is that during project execution, that there isn't one plan that serves everybody. There are multiple plans that serves the level of control of the project itself. Now, so what we want to think about is, we want to think about managing during execution and managing that uncertainty is really about managing the stages and not necessarily the tasks. So part of our project management really thinks about, all right, well, where are the critical management points? What are the stage gates? And of course, stage gates are well documented in the body of knowledge, but they're not really managed during execution in the way that makes sense for most people. So a stage gate for a work team is going to be very different than a stage gate for the CEO or the project owner. So for example, this is a project that we did for Day 2 Health, right? And in 3 months, what we were able to do is increase their output by 300% with the same resources, just taking and these guys are making software, right? So these are software development, and in 90 days, just taking them out of their detail and giving them a bigger picture, they were able to achieve those kinds of results. And of course, Lauren Wilson, she actually, this is in Boulder, by the way. She says that we're not dealing with those silly challenges of not knowing how to work together, how to collaborate, but now we're focusing on the really business challenges. So focusing on the stage gates really takes the team out of the detail and allows them to focus on what's the big picture. Now in stage 2, or secret 2, I want to talk about collaboration, and I want to make sure that I've got plenty of time here. When I wrote my book, one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure that what I was going to write about was not something that was necessarily covered by someone else. And the question that I was asking was, what are people doing? What do people believe is effective, and what is actually effective? And so when I was doing this research, we commissioned some research, and what people are doing is they're establishing project management offices. They're providing training for project management teams, and great. And they're building maturity and capability following the Project Management Institute's PMBOK, and in Europe, much more on the IPMA, and focusing on managing projects to business strategy. And that's what most people are doing. And I think that, when we look at, where people are investing, these are the things that people are investing in. Now, we took a look at what is actually working. And what we found in our research was that, between the high performers and the low performers, there's a big difference. The low performers got 36% successful project completions. And by success, business deliverables, budget, and schedule, right? So the big three, right? But there was another group of the high performers that did much better. So we wanted to know, well, what are they doing differently? What's actually different between these two groups? And what we're finding is that the high performers, what they have versus the low performance is they've got good performance data. They know where they are all the time. They're making decisions at the right time. They're not chasing their tails. They're not fighting fires. They're being proactive. They have a stable schedule. And this is different than what most people think. Most people think that, we should have a good plan and have a quote unquote good schedule. And really what we want is a stable schedule, a schedule that doesn't change from day to day. And that was really a big thing. And then the fourth thing was really this idea of a culture of delivery excellence. So the emphasis in the high performers versus the low performers was not we're good planners. The difference between the high performers and the low performers was really we are good deliverers, we're the good executors. And all of these things have one thing in common, and that is execution, not planning. And here's the thing, no plan is perfect. You can't have a perfect plan. I've tried to build perfect plans. The conventional approaches simply don't deliver on time or on budget. Now, what they do, And what the conventional approaches do is they deliver excellent quality. They deliver the project, as it's designed. They deliver the business benefits. But what they don't do is they don't deliver the projects on time and within budget. So yeah, you've got a great car, but it costs 4 times what you thought it was going to cost. And here's the thing, people accept this as normal. And, while these results, I think, are encouraging, they show that the lower performance rate is simply not acceptable. Now, when we look at the difference, why is that? Why is it that the executors are different? And why is it that we can't deliver on schedule and on budget? Is that most of the education that we see is around control and not on delivery. And when we look at the body of knowledge and it talks about delivering on time and on budget, there's very little in the PMBOK, the project management body of knowledge, that talks about execution. And when it does talk about execution, it talks about, well, we should have a capable project manager. Well, so that's essentially says, do all these wonderful things and then hire Superman or Superwoman. And here's the truth of it. You can't have a Superman or a Superwoman on every project. And nor can an organization that delivers projects rely on Superman or Superwomen. And, there's a big bonus if you can make that bridge, if you can overcome that obstacle of being from a poor executor to a better or a good executor. The difference in the financial performance is huge. I mean, when we look at the best executors, 60% versus 20% on financial performance, that's about 50% versus 75% on strategic initiatives and alignment with strategy. Oh, and I had these wonderful things here. Look, so you can get there and you can see whether you're part of that good executor or low executor. And so you can look at the behavior of your team and you can do a quick diagnostic, right? We can look and say, okay, well, what are people doing? Are people living on the past? Meaning, are project management activities focused on what has happened instead of what will happen? Do we have the conflicting goals between, for example, procurement and construction, or design and construction, or, take your pick. Many times when I work on a project with a client, it seems like the only people that are on the project is actually the project manager. Nobody else is actually on the project. Everybody's in their silo. Shifting priorities, huge. People, this is important today. No, this is important this was important yesterday, but now this other thing is important now. That priorities are constantly shifting. And the wandering bottleneck. Yeah, we're short of this resource last week, and now we're short of this resource this week. And slow response to problems. And when I say slow response, meaning I sent this guy an email, he didn't respond, and time goes by, tick tock, tick tock. Any project doing is worth doing quickly. If you can't respond quickly, then you cannot get the results that you want. So my point here is that there's an entire behavioral aspect to delivering projects when you want them. And my mentor, Dr. Goldratt, he said that, show me how you measure me and I'll show you how I behave. And he was probably the first behavioral psychologist I ever met. And his point was, his insight was that measurements have a huge impact on people's behavior. So if you measure people on cost, then they're going to minimize cost. If you measure people on other things, they're going to devote to that. I mean, think about driving down the road. If there's a police car by the side of the road, doesn't everyone check their speedometer? So but we can employ the same idea in projects. And we think about, well, what is the behavior that we want? Well, one behavior that we want, and I don't have time to go through all of that in this webinar, is velocity. So one of the things that is important is, are we moving quickly? You know, you think about a project like it's a car on a racetrack, right? That, you know, you're in a NASCAR race and, you know, you got to keep that car on the track. If it's in the pit, you know, the project is not being completed. So one of the things that we look at is, are we completing tasks quickly? What's the rate of task completion? Is the project actually moving forward? And this is different than the S curve, right? This is not, are we, you know, completing X number of hours versus X number of budget. This is actually the rate. How many did we do per day, per week? And we can look at the slope of that line and say, you know, hey, is that slope increasing? Is that slope rising? Is it slope leveling off? So we can actually gauge the speed of our project completion and say, hey, look at that spot right there. It starts to flatten out. What the heck is going on? Our project is slowing down. And so we can get early warning about whether our project is going to be done on time or not. The other thing we look at too is we look at problem solving. And you know, what we do is we employ a method of projects. You know, if a task is blocked, in other words, if it's stopped, if it's waiting for something, right? We want to move forward on this task, but we have to wait. We have to wait for a decision. We have to wait for a design. We have to wait for a vendor, whatever it is. And the other thing we look at is, if we don't take action, this will be stopped. So we track these items called issues, right? We talk about blockages, and the red is, this is stopped, and the yellow is, if we don't do something, this will be stopped. And what we're looking for is, we're looking for a declining slope in the blocked items, because blocked items are surprises. And it tells us, are we anticipating the problems in our project, or are we just waiting for a surprise? And we should see a fairly stable of the critical issues, because this tells us, hey, we're looking ahead, we're taking action, and we should see something stable here. And this tells us how well is the team behaving, right? Because the key to successful execution is really about, how quickly can we take time? How quickly can we respond? How quickly can we respond when something comes up? How are we able to anticipate? So the idea here is, by putting just these two simple measurements, what we do is we direct the team to the future and not to the past. And just a future direction makes a difference in the velocity and the completion. We did a project with Trinity River Authority, and here's one of their water treatment facilities in Dallas, Texas. And you know, as a result, you know, doing simple things, right? Simple things, you know, they got a 40% bump in productivity, meaning they got 40% more work done with the same resources in the space of about 6 months. This is one of the guys on the project. I do not know how to say his last name, but what he was, you know, the idea here of visual project management is really about giving people the information that they need so they can act early. And we're not trailing activities. Now, the third thing I want to talk about is visibility, and this is really the beginning of collaboration. And in order to understand why visibility is so important, you have to understand, why are projects late all the time? So imagine that you are the new director of engineering. This is your office, and all of these cubicles here, you know, here's a door right here, and this fellow right here, you know, he's one of your design engineers, and he's a Porsche enthusiast, and he's got cars and stuff in his office. And you know, this guy right here is a cyclist, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, you can walk down the aisle and you can see everybody's busy. They're not on Facebook, and, you know, they're not on the car websites and stuff like that. But how can you really see what the work is in your department? You know, all of these people, they're working on projects. And this really gets to really the core problem in execution, and that is that people on the project team do not really know with certainty where they are in the project. And they can't really see the direction on where they're going. Why? Because the project plan is on a hard drive someplace. And the only time anybody ever sees it is at the beginning of the project, and then everybody else is working off of checklists, right? So the drivers of late projects from our research, right, is that we don't know what's most important. And I say we, the project team. We don't know what resources we have at our disposal, and we can't see where we are, and we can't see the problems until they actually land in our lap. So what we need is a kind of a map, right? Now that map really has two criteria. It needs to know, we need to know where are we now, and we need to have some agreement that the map is actually a representation of where we are. In other words, we all have to agree this is actually a representation of where we are in this project. So what we do is we build visual project boards. Visual project boards, I mean, this is really low tech. This is a overview of your project path where you've got the various stage gates across the top, and then you've got things you want to manage on the left, and each one of these little cards represents some kind of a unit of work, right? The idea behind the visual board is really founded in research that shows that visual information is easily decipherable, and we can digest the visual information much faster than we can verbal or written. So the idea is that we can present this map, and everyone can look at this map, and everyone can say, oh, okay, here we are. This is your map. And there's all different kinds of maps, right? So now, here's the thing. The map is the beginning, right? So everybody, I want to back up here. I want to back up one slide here. Everybody looks at these visual boards and they say, this is awesome and this is great. But the map is only the beginning, right? The map is your prop. Because what the map does is provide a lever for collaboration. So you can get your team and they can collaborate around that process, right? So we do this collaboration process, the stand-up meeting. I mean, this is not new stuff. This is people standing up, looking at the map and saying, here's where we are, here's what we need to do. And they all come in different shapes and sizes. This last one is probably the biggest one we ever made. It's like 30 feet long or something like that, 500 projects. But my point is that the map, by expressing your project in a visual way, what we're able to do is we're able to see who does the work. It shows us where do we need to focus so we can get the clarity on those critical issues and let those needles in the haystack of data, your 4,000 line item schedule, it pops out, right? And it promotes a team effort. Listen, people want to work together, right? They want to work together. They want to gather around something. It provides an accountability. And when I say accountability, I mean accountability in the sense of, not in the sense of, you must do this, but in the sense of, okay, I've got this, you've got that, we have agreement on how we're going to work together. And it answers the question for the team, what's next? What's the most important thing that we need to do? But the thing I want to guard against is that the visual project board is not a replacement for planning, and it's not the solution for all your delivery problems, right? But it is a solution, right? We did this project with Worley Parsons, a big engineering firm that works for BP and for other oil field companies. They got 12% bump in efficiency, right? In a space of 6 months, all right? And we were able to increase their throughput 24% in 6 months, and they saved $11 million. People say this makes them more efficient. People love these visual boards. They love them. So if you've got people on your team that don't want to play, then you build yourself a visual board. Build yourself a board of your project. So what comes first, right? So you're thinking about your project. What comes first? Is it the plan, which has, or is it really the car, right? Is it the vehicle? And I propose that what comes first in your project plan is not building a complicated plan, but it's really deciding, how are you going to work together? How do you take all of these pieces and put them together and build something that's going to really drive progress first, or drive progress quickly, right? In the literature, the execution methodology is overlooked. There's very little in the literature about how do we execute projects. Lots about planning and control, but not a lot about how do we actually do this in practice. So for, what I'm saying is that what comes first is not your plan. What comes first is, how do you execute? So we're going to open it up to questions, and I guess I leave this up here and.
Yep. So thank you, Mark. So as Mark said, we do have time for a couple of questions, which I will read, and then Mark will respond.
Okay, I'm happy to do that. Let me put myself on video here so you can see, yes, I am live.
There we go.
Beautiful office in Tulsa, Oklahoma. See, I got all dressed up for you. I put a shirt on and everything.
Oh, awesome. So as a reminder to the audience, to submit a question, please click the Q&A button at the top of your Zoom screen and type in your question, and we will get them answered. So looks like the first question that we have is, Mark, what are the most important qualities of a good project manager? So I know you kind of mentioned, good organizational skills, and mentioned hiring, a Superman or a Superwoman, but what are really the good qualities behind a great project manager?
I think the best qualities, I'm stopping sharing my screen because PowerPoint just crashed here. I think what I look for in a project manager is, first of all, can they collaborate? Can they get along well with others? Can they pull a team together? What's their team building ability? And then I look at their, I want to say attention to detail, I guess would be the other thing, right? I want to know, are they able to pull people together? That's the most important thing. And then I'm looking at, okay, can they herd all of this detail that's going to be in a project? Those are the two big things that I'm looking for.
Okay, great. The next question that we have, what kind of specific training or certifications or that sort of thing do you think are valuable in this field? I know, there's the PMP and that sort of thing. But yeah, really what kind of, education, certifications, that sort of thing do you think are valuable in the project management field?
All right. So I think, I would say that the PMP is valuable to learn about the landscape of project management. But I would also learn about process improvement. How do I map a process? I would want to learn about how do I, how can I take my project and, think of it as a process and not necessarily, I'm not thinking about Six Sigma, but more about generalized process improvement. I'm trying to think, that's probably the two big things. When I look at the, when I'm hiring project managers, I'm looking for, track record. I'm looking for some domain knowledge. Do they understand how projects are operated? And then the other thing I'm looking for is, do they understand process improvement? Because really, my view is that a project manager is about being also a manager of the process and not just a manager of the project.
Okay, Great. Our next question is, what tools do you recommend in the execution of the plan in a project? So maybe software, Slack or Redbooth or that kind of thing. Just overall tools that you would recommend.
All right. Well, I've used Basecamp. Let me tell you a little bit about our company. Our company is distributed, so our people are everywhere. We don't have an office. Everybody doesn't. Our work is at our client, so our people are at our client. So we use things like Basecamp, SharePoint, and we use those things for document sharing and that sort of thing. Slack is great for that kind of instant messaging, keeping track of conversation threads, stuff like that. For project management, we're using things like critical chain software, like Beam software or Exapron or something like that. If we're building a project plan, those are the kinds of tools I think, in terms of managing the project, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Our next question comes from Raymond. Raymond wants to know what type of entry-level positions should be sought after. So, and maybe the titles of those positions.
Ooh, I'll tell you what, I think probably I would look for project controls. I would look for a project controls position. And the reason that I would look for project controls is because project controls manages both budget and schedule, which are the two biggest influencers of your project success. So you want to have mastery of project schedules, and you want to have mastery of the budget process. And I think that's what I would shoot for if I was going to go after it. I would look for a larger organization that has these positions. And I'll tell you that many projects and many project organizations. I'm working with a company right now. They're building marine projects, like big projects for marine, the stuff on the ocean. They don't even have this position called project controls. And so if you're entry level, and what you want to do is you want to go find those companies that are really good at projects. And my experience, the oil industry is, and I'm talking about the majors. I'm talking about Shell, Chevron, Exxon. Those guys, they know how to manage big, super projects. Fluor Daniels, go after one of those big guys and get a job there, and you can learn how the big boys do it, which will then serve your career, later when you decide that, Fluor is probably not the place I want to be. I want to be, at some small solar energy company or something like that. Excuse me.
Great. It looks like our last question that we have for the night is, what was the most challenging aspect of the last project that you worked on?
Ooh, what a great question. The biggest challenge is always, I'm trying to think the last project that I worked on. The biggest challenge is the project owner and getting them to play in a structure, right? Because in some and that was the last project that I worked on. Excuse me. That was just the last project. I haven't encountered that in many other projects, but the last project was the project owner really gave lip service to structure. And that was pretty frustrating for a process guy like me, saying, we do this, and then we do this, and then we do this, and we do this, and there's a reason we do the structure. And he was a more seat of the pants kind of a guy. So, we were successful on the project, but I was not successful I was not successful in changing the culture, because the project owners said, no, I think we're just going to go this way. So I think, we can have all the best technology, and we can have all the best procedures, and, we can have the degree and the certification. But I'll tell you what, we're going to go out to the market, and we're specialists. And not everyone values a specialist. And I think that that's probably the obstacle that I've found, which kind of goes back to that other question of, what's the right job? The first job for an entry-level job is find somebody that really values your domain, right? If you get, you can graduate and get your PMI, and, you can have this certificate in project management, and you can go to a company and says, yeah, we need project management, but they have no idea what project management is. They have no culture of project management. And, you will struggle in that kind of environment.
Okay, great. We did have one more question come in.
And I've got time, and I have time for that.
Awesome. So the question is, do you have any recommendation for managing natural resource projects on public lands?
Interesting question. I don't have any specific recommendations for managing natural resources. All I can say is that I've worked on software development, product development, construction, manufacturing, engineer to order manufacturing. I'm trying to think of all the different variety of engineering projects. I've worked on this big spectrum of projects. And here's what I've learned is that a project is a project is a project. It's really, you have resources, you have stuff to do, they have to get done in a certain order, you have an objective that you're trying to reach. And in that sense, every project is the same. Every project is the same. So, there are domain differences. I mean, okay, well, the Gulf oil spill cleanup. I mean, okay, we're washing oil off of boats and, stuff like that. I mean, that's like, is there anybody else doing that? No, but it was still a project, right? So, natural resource conservation projects are exactly the same. They have an objective, right? There is an objective. You have a process to deliver that objective, and then you have to marshal the resources and organize the process to do that. So it really doesn't matter what you're doing. What matters is how you're doing it.
Great. Well, thank you, Mark, for your time and insights tonight. And that will conclude our Enlightening Talks for this evening.
Happy to do it.
A huge thanks to our speaker, Mark, for his time and participation. Thank you to all of our viewers for joining us. We hope that you found the conversation informative and useful in your work. You can register for upcoming Enlightening Talks sessions from the Enlightening Talks webpage at csuglobal.edu/enlightening-talks. And on behalf of everyone at Colorado State University Global Campus, thank you and good night.